Let's kick things off. It's noon Eastern time. It's good to have a nice group assembled here today. My name is Michael Goldberg. I'm our executive director of the Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship at Case Western Reserve University. I also am a professor at the Weatherhead School of Management. I'm coming to you from my Airbnb in the Azores Islands, where I'm on a cheese tasting expedition because 50% of the cheese in Portugal, we were just chatting, is made in the Azores Islands, and doing some work on a Fulbright here for 2 weeks. So, and eating my way through this island. So Doug, I will have to go do some exercise together and walk the dogs when I get back. It is great to have Candice Marchand join us today for our entrepreneurship speaker series. She has had a really interesting and wonderful journey, which we'll get into today as part of the discussion. All of our sessions are moderated by Case students, and we're thrilled that Brooke Kale, who is a colleague here at Case Western Reserve University, working at the Swetland Center, which hopefully she can talk a little bit about, and also is a new part-time MBA student, so just started this summer. So Brooke, we're so thrilled to have you moderating. For those, most of you have been on our sessions before, we like these to be interactive, so let Brooke know either by raising your hand or putting something in the Zoom chat, or if you're watching on LinkedIn Live, just put in the comment your question for Candice, and we will feed that back to Brooke. So Candice, thank you for joining. Brooke, thanks for moderating, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be here. I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Candice Marchant and to be able to facilitate this conversation today. As Michael said, I am a program manager at the Swetland Center for Environmental Health and also a part-time MBA student. So interested in food entrepreneurship. So this is really exciting. I am really pleased to introduce you all to Dr. Candice Marchand. She is a Case Western Reserve alumna with a PhD in polymer science and an MD from Case Western School of Medicine. Since she founded Marchant Manor Cheese, she's also been known as the Cheese Doctor. Dr. Marchant was born in Wisconsin and has always loved cheese. Her love of cheese remained in the background while she completed her medical degree in 1986, obtained a PhD in polymer science, and had 2 daughters. Her husband became a professor at Case Western Reserve, where they had a joint NIH research program. The career of research enabled the couple to travel, present research data, and granted them the opportunity to try local cheeses wherever they traveled. Dr. Marchant then became a pathologist at the Cleveland Clinic and eventually became a medical director of the blood coagulation laboratory. In 2006, Dr. Marchant was appointed the chair of the Pathology and Laboratory Medicine Institute, becoming the first woman at the Cleveland Clinic to head a clinical institute. In 2013, Dr. Marchant miraculously found herself with some extra time and began experimenting with different types of cheeses, of soft cheeses she had fallen in love with while traveling in Europe. After the academic, she bought books on cheese making and performed extensive research on the process. She joined the Ohio Cheese Guild as an enthusiast and received encouragement to develop her cheeses. She finally settled on calling her business Marchant Manor Cheese as an homage to her husband's English heritage. Ever evolving, Dr. Marchant continues to test different recipes, drawing on the myriad flavor profiles for her cheeses. We are really excited to learn more from her today about her career journey from medicine to entrepreneurship. We would also, Dr. Marchant and I discussed, we would like to know who's with us today. So those of you in the audience, if you'd be willing to introduce yourselves just in the chat or in the comments on LinkedIn, we would be very grateful. So with that, Dr. Marchant, your journey is so inspiring on both the medical and entrepreneurial sides. I'm curious to know what is most similar between your work in medicine and your cheese making business, and what is most distinct?
Well, Brooke and Michael, thank you so much for inviting me today. I think this is going to be a fun interview. I'm really looking forward to hearing the questions from you and from the audience. You know, it's very interesting having a career. I was in medicine at the clinic for 36 years, and I've been making cheese now commercially for almost 4 years. And there are some similarities. You know, I think that both the food industry and the medical profession are service industries. And people go into them to either help other people, like in medicine, or in the food industry. It's great to see people having a good time and enjoying the food. So in some ways, there's a lot of similarities with that. Both of them are team sports. You can't run a restaurant or a cheese business with one person. There's so many aspects to cheese making. There's the cheese, you know, the animal husbandry, there's making the cheese, there's affinage or aging it. There's people in retail that are selling it. It's the same thing in medicine. I was a pathologist, so I was one part of a cog of a huge medical team. So there are a lot of similarities. And actually, one of my jobs in pathology and lab medicine, I was also, in addition to being chair, I was the regulatory director for all the laboratories at main campus, which is a huge, huge laboratory, and had to deal with regulatory agencies and government agencies. And now in the food service industry, food safety is so super important that I think there are some similarities with, you know, the FDA and the ODA and the local health inspectors as well. But, you know, there's honestly huge differences. I was part of a massive institute. So I was the chair of an institute of 1,400 people at the Cleveland Clinic, and Cleveland Clinic has 50,000 employees. So HR was one of those things that I had a whole wing of people doing. Finance was something that I had a whole group of people doing. And now with the cheese business, and we are really tiny. I have 2 full-time employees and a couple of part-time employees. So HR is me, business development is me, finance is me. So it's a huge learning curve going from a very, very large organization with just a lot of resources and infrastructure to one where you know, it's really a very small business. So, and I think that's true for a lot of new entrepreneurs that are starting up their own business.
Thank you so much. That's so interesting. And I also wonder if you could touch on or talk about one thing you had mentioned when we talked earlier was some of the parallels between the polymers and the actual process of making cheese. I found that.
Yeah, so the actual chemical background, I'm a chemistry geek, you know, by my background. And I found that, you know, cheeses are a polymer network. Cheeses are large molecules that are all put together. So my background in polymer science was really very helpful in understanding the chemistry. And I don't know if we have any hematologists in the audience, but the actual process of taking milk and making curds chemically is very similar to taking blood and making blood clots. So the chemistry is actually very, very similar. And the first time I heard that, I was actually on a plane to New York City to take a cheese making class at Murray's Cheese in New York, a cheese appreciation class. And I was reading about the chemistry. And I had this aha moment on the plane. And I was like, this is absolutely incredible. It's the same chemistry I use in the laboratory every day. And I just got these goosebumps on my back. And this was one of those things that was like, this is something I have to learn about. But actually, one other thing I wanted to mention that's really different with the small business, and we can get into talking about it more later, is social media. And I know we were briefly talking about social media, you know, before the call started. And to me, at the Cleveland Clinic, we were almost prohibited from doing social media. They had said, you can't have a Facebook page, you can't have an Instagram page, you know, in terms of people posting things and linking to you. So I was really a social media idiot when I started this. And Rebecca Grynham, who's actually a case person who was working in biomedical engineering, she is one of my assistant cheesemakers and also helps with the social media. It's really helpful having somebody who is familiar with that. And I got introduced to TikTok the first time like 2 days ago. So now I'm going to have to go down the TikTok chute, I think.
Yeah, the TikTok definitely is a shoot. Well, thank you for that. I think it's so interesting to know about how many similarities there are, like you said, being a service industry and being a team, being part of a team, and some of the regulation and actually the chemistry of it and how many similarities there are. And definitely the distinct space of social media is very interesting too. So thank you for sharing that. I'm curious also, in a similar vein, what challenges and opportunities maybe you faced as a female leader in medicine and now as a female entrepreneur?
You know, I've actually thought of myself, I thought about this question a lot. And I think of myself, you know, in terms of my medical background as a leader, not a female leader. And I think that, you know, if you focus yourself that you're a leader because you're a female or you're an entrepreneur because you're a female, I think you miss the point. Being a good leader shouldn't matter whether you're male or female. And yeah, there are a lot of challenges. I know when I was developing leadership roles at the Cleveland Clinic, it was very hard with small children. And especially since a culture like the Cleveland Clinic demands meetings at 7 in the morning and now even 6 a.m., you know, having a family and having that type of responsibility is hard. And I know a lot of women kind of wait for leadership positions until their kids are out of the house and then can accelerate. There's a, you know, a thought process called on-ramps and off-ramps. You know, when can you actually develop your leadership skills? So I think there are, you know, some opportunities as, you know, a woman in leadership. And I think I did get some hopefully good notoriety at the clinic for being the first female head of a clinical institute. And for those of you who don't know the structure of the clinic, institutes are above departments. So I was over several department chairs. I was over about 1,400 employees, about 110 doctors. And, you know, they had called me the night before to say, I think you're going to get the job. And I was like, oh my God, the clinic has never appointed a female as an institute chair. Now, in 10 years of being institute chair, there were no other female institute chairs at the clinic. And it was just at the end when Serpil Erzurum got appointed as chair of the Research Institute. If you look, though, at the clinic statistics, now about 21% of leaders, and it's not necessarily at the institute chair level, but all leaders are female. And if I was just looking at the recent stats from the clinic, in my age group, there's only 18% female in my age group at the Cleveland Clinic that are doctors. Whereas in the younger age group, like coming out of residency program at age 30, it's now 50-50 male and female.
Wow. Very interesting to hear those statistics, and amazing that you were able to achieve all that you did in the space of medicine. So as you had mentioned on our call earlier, you're now retired from the Cleveland Clinic and are fully dedicated to Marchant Manor cheese. You have a lovely location in Cleveland Heights that I'm excited to visit, where people can go to have your teas with wine 5 days a week. How did you decide you were ready for Marchant Manor to become your full-time role, or how did your interest and commitment in cheese making, those goosebumps you mentioned, how did that evolve into a business and into your, you know, the dedication you have for it now?
Well, that goosebump weekend was really the first move. I'd gotten a gift from my husband for Christmas to go to Murray's Cheese in New York, which if you haven't been to Murray's, it's like an incredible cheesemonger. And they had a 3-day course called Cheese Boot Camp. And you tasted 75 cheeses paired with beers and wines. They taught you all about the chemistry, the microbiology, the animal husbandry. And I was just hooked. And I went home and I, you know, tried some different cheese recipes. Probably the first 10 were dismal failures. And I bought a cheese making book and kind of cooked my way through it. And little by little, people were saying, gee, your cheeses are really good. I was trying different recipes. I went to Vermont to the Sterling College and spent 2 weeks at Jasper Hill Farms and with a French cheesemaker learning to make mostly soft European cheeses, which are the ones I really, really liked. And people started saying, hey, these cheeses are good. And my daughters initially said, hey, Mom, these are great. I was like, you know, you're going to always tell me my cheeses are good. So then one of the guys in the audience, Doug Katz, I took some of my cheeses to him. And when he had a positive response, because, you know, he is like Mr. Cleveland in restauranting, I was really thrilled that he enjoyed the cheeses. And I eventually took them to a place called Ohio City Provisions on the west side, which is an all Ohio products shop that's actually run by Trevor Clatterbuck, who is a Case grad, and he also owns Fresh Fork Market. And he thought the cheeses were great. And he said, though, Candice, I'll do you one better. you're currently making cheeses at home from, grocery store milk, I have a connection with a dairy in Stark County, and you can get access to Guernsey milk. So I bought some of the Guernsey milk, and being the scientist, I went home and I did a comparison, all my different cheeses with 2 different types of milk, brought them into his shop, and they were blown away by the Guernsey milk, which is a richer milk, which has more beta carotene. It's a yellow milk color. And, he said, you really should do this. And, an opportunity opened up through him to lease space and make the cheeses at this Amish dairy. So, at that point, I was still working full time. I had recently stepped down as institute chair because after 10 years of administrative hassle and politics, that was enough. I wanted to get back into clinical medicine. And I, was making cheese really once a week. And then I thought, well, I can retire at age 65 at the clinic. So let's plan to see if this cheese making might be something that I might be interested in doing. So I was selling cheese at the Shaker Square Market, at Ohio City Provisions, and people were really, really liking it. So thinking that, if I retire, I am not the sort to sit home and read magazines. I would fall asleep or worse. And I need to be busy. I need a new challenge. And this sounded like a lot of fun. And because I knew I could, retire comfortably, it allowed me to then say, what do I want to do with the next chapter in my life? And it's a great and interesting challenge. I'm learning so much, about different things. Because I know a lot of people at the clinic, a lot of my fellow colleagues at the clinic are saying, we're watching you to see what you do. We're also jealous that you've got something to do when you retire. I've heard so many retired people saying, I am so bored, what can I do? So this is my answer to myself.
Speaking of people being so excited to see what you do, it is really exciting to hear about your journey. I'm curious, what are your aspirations as the cheese doctor or for Marchant Manor cheese?
My real aspiration is to make just the most excellent cheese I can. And my real thrill from cheese making is when people say, hey, that's the best cheese I've had, or I didn't know Ohio made cheeses like that. That to me is the reason for doing this. It's my passion that's driving my desire to see other people become passionate about my cheese. Do I want to be a household word across the country? Probably not. Do I want to have international distribution? Probably not. Ask me again in 5 years, but I really think I would love to saturate the market in Ohio so that people know my cheeses and be able to get my cheeses out to restaurants, expand my wholesale reach. People have asked if I'm going to open another shop. Not for a while. We'll see how things go. But really, that really is my overall aspiration. But my tagline for the business now is makers, mongers, and mentors. So we want to make the most excellent cheese. We want to be able to sell, and my shop sells my cheeses, as well as supporting other artisanal cheesemakers and artisan food products. And then the last one is the mentors. I want to teach people. I'm a professor, I'm used to teaching med school. I want to teach people about making cheese and get them the excitement of seeing milk go to curds and whey at home, and teach people about different cheeses that they may not know about. So that makers, mongers, and mentors is really my threefold plan at this point for the business.
Great. Thank you. And I can certainly attest to how delicious your cheese is. I have some in my fridge right now, and I have to pace myself. I have to only let myself have a quarter of it in one sitting. Otherwise I'll eat the whole thing because it's so yummy. But that's great. In the vein of speaking of mentorship, my last question for you is, what advice do you have for Case Western Reserve students, or maybe some of the other entrepreneurs and professionals on the call today about determining how to balance various passions? You come from a place of having expertise in medicine and now in cheese making. And so how do you balance all of your interests and passions? Do you have any
Yeah,
advice?
that's a really good question, because I think these days it's much easier, if you want to develop a side gig or a business, it's much easier to do that with social media and e-commerce. I know a lot of people who have a small business and can sell things on the side. I think that some of the advice that I would have would be, understand yourself. Are you the sort of person that would walk in tomorrow and tell your boss, I quit, and then develop a business? Or are you the sort of person who plans and plans and plans and knows that it's going to be successful and plans for a transition? That's what I did. I was planning for probably 3 or 4 years to develop the business. I even went so far as to work with my department chair to recruit somebody good to replace me in my medical role, so that I felt good about leaving the clinic. And I knew at that time I was heading towards retirement. But I think that one of the things, you've got to be passionate. If you really want to switch to a different career, I guess one step back, your career should be your passion, or your passion should be your career. And it's not always for everyone. But if you have something you're really passionate about, that is, a message that, maybe there's a niche for that if you can find the right, business plan and the right niche. I think financial planning for that type of thing is really important. If you're the sort of person who wants to walk in and say, I quit, make sure you've got financial planning or know the resources that you've got to apply for financial backing. And for me, that was really helpful, having a good financial planner and somebody that could say, oh, Candice, you can do this. Even if you retire, you'll be okay and running this cheese business. So I think that's really, very important. One of my other recommendations that helped me is hiring high level people in your business early, so that you aren't doing absolutely everything, because I hired my manager for my shop early. He had some, Shane Kearns, he had some retail experience before. And that was really very helpful because I can trust him with that part of my business. And Rebecca, as I mentioned, she was really helpful for that. And one other shout out for Case, I just have to mention my assistant cheesemaker from the beginning was Dr. Mary Barkley, who's the former department chair of chemistry at Case. And Mary and I are both like chemistry geeks. So we were really funny together, learning cheese making. So, have people that can support you. Also, I think have a good, and some people call it board of directors. If you've got people that are in the industry, consultants, people that you can bounce things off of. One thing I think, Brooke, you and I talked about before was I got a lot of help from the small business development group through Cleveland State. Katie Van Dyke was really helpful to meet with to help develop a business plan, great sounding boards. They've got great resources on finance and tax. And I know, Michael, your group is the same at Veale. But I think something like that was really very helpful for me as I was developing this, that I think other entrepreneurs can take advantage of.
Thank you for all that great insight and advice and resources. It's really helpful. And yeah, I really appreciate all of your answers to my questions. I want to leave plenty of time for questions from our audience. So without further ado, I will see if we have any questions. You can either put your questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and ask a question off mute, that would be wonderful. Yeah, so I'll turn it over for any questions coming in.
I have a question. So Candice, when you're doing events or doing social media, I guess I'm just interested to see what's worked really well when you communicate what you're doing. And so what do you see as the driver for the shop, and then maybe driver for sales in general?
Well, I think in general, we're really working our way through a lot of that. We're still really young. We opened the shop about 13, 14 months ago. I think Instagram has been good because cheese is quite visual. So we've got a lot of followers, on Instagram. I think our email that we send out, we have an email list of about 12 to 1,300 people. That's helpful in driving some business to the shop. As far as events, we're still figuring out what's the best way to get people signing up for events. I know recently I got interviewed again by the Plain Dealer, and an article came out about one of the events that we've had, and that was, you know, that kind of press is really helpful for getting people to events. I think having some other aspects of interacting with, you know, both Instagram and Facebook. I haven't found Facebook maybe as important for getting people into the shop. I think Instagram's been more helpful. You know, some of the things too with the Cleveland, like Lee Road special interest group, that's been helpful in terms of co-marketing with other businesses. What do you find works best for yours? I mean, you just opened Amba. Where did you find the biggest benefit from the advertising and the marketing you did?
I think that initially I thought that, you know, I think that all of the PR, you know, all of the articles and the connection with the local media and that kind of thing really drives sort of an opening or a new product. And so I think you have a good 6 months where you can tease that out and sort of, you know, as we're building out the space, we're able to put it on social media and develop our sort of friend base. And then we connect with an amazing social media person who really tags the right people and does the right things social media wise too. And then you get the initial push with articles, things like that. I think it's super important to have that strength at the beginning and be prepared for that onslaught. I think the biggest challenge I think in our business is you have to figure out how to drive the customer first, but you also have to offer the product that's perfect the first time they come, or you've really lost all of those people. Right. So I think we've been lucky with a little bit of time on our hands through the pandemic to really polish and do things so that we know are going to work, and then really hiring the right people to push out the message. Actually, Michael, you know, might relate to this. We're relatives actually, and a relative of ours told me how, you know, you think that everyone knows your business, and everyone, even a big company like, say, like our phone companies or our gas companies. I mean, you would be surprised at the you know, the amount of people that really know these names or logos, or, you know, and so you think somehow that you're a bigger person in the community or in the world with your business. And I don't think you could ever promote it enough or speak enough to different people. There's just, you know, you're immersed in it. So you think that everyone else knows of you. And so anything you can do to get the word out in any way, I think is the key.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I know when we opened our shop, we opened in February of 2021. And if any of you remember 2021, that was right in the midst of the pandemic. And it was a tough time to open a new shop. And we couldn't have events. We couldn't have people in the store easily. We could have maybe, you know, 6 people at most in the shop at one time. So that was a challenge. And in some ways, I think my business is still living in that, you know, pandemic mindset, you know, trying to now open up, do more events, have more people in, advertise a lot. In some ways, I think we're still growing through that. I always tell people in some ways it was good we started during the pandemic because not much was expected at the beginning, and you could start slowly and build things up. And you don't have to do a big splash opening and have everything and be everything to everyone at the beginning. So in a way, it was a unique opportunity. But it also has, you know, helped us reflect and grow. So your comments about, you know, the connections with other businesses and how you know, do those connecting hashtags and reposts and things, that really makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the questions. We have some questions in the chat too, but let's start with those with their hand raised. So Ashley, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I'm Ashley Weingart. I just recently started here as the Associate Director of Marketing and Communications at the Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship at Case Western. That's a long title. And then I'm also founder at Perfectly Imperfect Produce. And so I'm so inspired by your story and just your drive to explore, something that you had passion for later in your career. I wondered if you ever considered exploring sort of a direct to consumer model for delivering your cheese via online orders, or if you're really committed to just sort of the retail storefront avenue.
That's a actually very timely question, because that's my next phase. Right now, we have not been able to, we've done some direct to consumer, and that was the way we started during the pandemic. We did have a website that you could pick up your cheese or get it home delivered, and home delivery was big in the pandemic because people weren't going out, and then we could leave cheese on their doorstep. But we're getting to the point that I would like to do shipping. I would like to do direct to consumer sales. And right now we have some incompatibilities between our website and our point of sale system. So we're looking at consolidating that so that we have a more streamlined inventory system and a way to do the online sales and shipping. So I think that can be good. We're also looking at some of the sites like Faire to be able to sell some of our products, and and just deciding whether is something like DoorDash worth thinking about, or Instacart. So since we're a high-end, really kind of a high-end grocery, is that something that might help increase our sales? One thing I've always been really cautious about, because we are really small and we can't make a huge capacity of cheese, is making sure that our growth is in lockstep with our production. The last thing I want to do is open it up to all social media and have 80,000 orders for cheese come in that I can't fulfill. So I think coming up with ways that there's at least guardrails on some of the social media and some of the e-commerce sites, and like shipping cheese. If you ever think about it, one piece of cheese to ship to Florida, you probably have to ship with 8 pounds of ice, and it's going to cost, and you got to ship it overnight, and it'll cost you $100. So there are guardrails I think you have to put around, in terms of initially we want to look at Ohio and maybe the surrounding states that we can get cheese to relatively quickly for a relatively low price point in shipping. But that's a great question.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of experience in this area, and I'd love to help you in any way I can. Another thought that comes to mind is if you're not familiar with the company called Market Wagon that's locally here, which essentially is sort of like a farmer's market delivered to you. And so you can kind of set, it's locally here in Northeast Ohio, but allows you to sort of open up the orders to whatever amount of inventory that you're interested in providing or able to provide. So be happy to talk to you offline and connect the dots for you. And
I have heard of them. I've not, used them at this point. So I really would love to follow up and talk to you about that.
Yeah, I'll reach out. Thank you.
Thank you for that resource too of Market Wagon. Seems like something a lot of us should look into. Nazar, am I saying your name right? Do you want to?
Nazar, yeah.
Nazar.
Yeah, I just have a kind of a quick fun question. What's your favorite cheese, both to consume and also to make? I'm kind of curious.
Well, of all the cheese, I mean, I really do like my cheeses, but my absolute favorite cheese in the world is one called Epoisse. It's a washed rind cheese from France. It's one of the stinky cheeses that was banned on the Paris Metro. And I was known to, it's a raw milk cheese, and in Europe you can sell them before 60 days. Whereas in the US, you can't. So I was known to smuggle that home in my suitcase from Europe when I would go over there. So I really, really adore a good ripe Epoisse on a crusty baguette. It's wonderful. My favorite cheese to make is one of my own recipes. It's called Henley. It's a little barrel-shaped, what I call velvet rind cheese that's made with a really unique mold culture called Geotrichum candidum. It's a hard culture to grow on cheeses, so I love the challenge. And I love these cheeses, and there's really nothing like this little cheese. I know Doug used to carry it at Fire, and it's now for sale at Heinen's as well. And I make it in both cow and goat milk. One of my initial plans in my business plan is I'm never going to have a farm. People ask me, when are you going to have cows? I'm not going to have cows. But I really would love to source unique milks from different farmers, goat milk, Guernsey cow milk, Jersey cow milk, Holstein brown Swiss, because they all give different flavors to the cheese. So this Henley made in both goat milk and cow milk is one of my first forays into making the same recipe with a different milk and seeing, aha, how different it turns out.
Now I actually have the Henley goat in my fridge right now. That's what I've been munching on this week, and it's so good. It's really yummy.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite.
Great. We have a question in the chat. My doctor said I should watch my cheese consumption regarding some cholesterol concerns. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, cheese is a high fat product, and mine are triple cream, which means I add extra cream to milk to get them creamy. I say everything in moderation. Don't eat the whole wheel of Henley or the whole wheel of Elmstead Ash at one time. I think that, lower fat cheeses, there are some lower fat cheeses on the market that are quite good. And I know other people have issues with salt consumption. And some of the thing with salt on cheeses, because it is one of the main components, is that it does give a lot of flavor. It does a lot of chemical things to cheeses. But I've started experimenting with making slightly lower salt versions of my cheese, especially the Henley, which is the lowest salt of all of my cheeses. So I think there are ways that, we can, meet some of the health needs. The other thing with cheeses too, they are a fermented product. So there are a lot of good organisms, they're a live product. So even though they do have higher fat contents, the probiotic and the organism cultures in cheese kind of balances some of that as well.
Great. It looks like we have a question in the chat, and I think this will be our last audience question. What is the biggest challenge to expanding capacity so you can leverage the direct to the consumer option? Also, what about pairing with local wines and using their established retail and or shipping infrastructure? And that is a question from Mindy. So if you want to clarify anything I said.
Yeah, no, those are two great questions. And that actually hits on the next phase of my business. I really would like to establish my own cheese making space. Right now, I lease 2 days a week at an Amish dairy in Stark County, so I'm working under their infrastructure, and I have to work within their time frame and restrictions. And some days they'll, call me at 6 o'clock on Friday morning and saying, we're making cheddar, you can't start till 2:30 this afternoon, and then I'm there till midnight. So the next phase is really developing my own cheese making space so that I could make cheese 7 days a week, if I had the employees and the personnel and the milk. That's another financial investment, and I have to make sure I make that wisely. And where that will be, I'm still working that through. So yeah, that's the next step that I need to do. And that's when I figure the marketing can go hog wild in terms of, or do I go into national distribution and your distributor profit margins get very, very small. I could make 1 billion cheeses and make 10 cents a cheese, but I can't, it takes a lot of infrastructure. Now, working with local wineries and wine shops, I haven't explored, any of their distribution networks, but we have paired with shops like the Wine Spot and with Cleveland Urban Winery and a couple of others to have them provide, our cheese there, and we, sell their wines there. The thing about shipping with wine, it's somewhat different than shipping with cheese just because of the temperature controlled nature of it. Cheese is such a perishable product, and mine being triple cream are squishable as well. So it's not like a huge wheel of cheddar where it's not going to compress and squish. Mine are 6-ounce cheeses that are pretty soft.
Right.
So we have some restrictions in terms of shipping. Not insurmountable, because I know a lot of people do ship it as long as you've got good, packaging infrastructure for the cheeses.
Thank you for your question, Mindy.
Sure.
So we have just a few minutes left. I wanted to give space, Candice, if there's anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to today, if you have any further comments or things you wanted to mention. And I also saw that there's questions in the chat related to vegan or dairy-free cheeses. So I don't know if you wanted to answer that quickly, since that seems an area of interest as well.
That is something I would like to talk about, because traditionally cheese by definition is a lactation product of a mammal, and that's been the definition for a long time. Because there's a lot of interest in plant-based eating and plant-based products, there are now some very good products, and I will call them cheeses because they really strive to have the same consistency, that are made plant-based. And it started mostly that they were like nut spreads almost, and really not that great. But there are several producers that are now culturing those plant-based products with traditional cheese cultures like Penicillium candidum or the blue molds, or even Geotrichum candidum, and making products that very much resemble, and both from an appearance and a texture point of view. And we tasted through probably 35 or 40 different vegan cheese products over the last year, and we currently carry about between 5 and 7, whichever we can have in the shop. And I think we have the largest selection of vegan cheeses of shops in Cleveland, to the point that we're now going to be starting to market. We do cheese boards for parties, with our cheeses and other people's cheeses. And we're going to also start marketing that we can do vegan cheese boards. In fact, we've got one event coming up in July that we're doing, multiple cheese boards, one of which is all vegan products. And I think there is a market for that. And I know Rebecca, who's on the call as my cheesemaker, one of the things that we want to take as a challenge is trying to make our own vegan cheeses that are plant-based with some of our interesting techniques. And that's in the next period of time. So watch this space.
That's great. I saw some clapping and smiles from the audience. So that seems like an exciting journey that we'll stay tuned with. I'm going to pass it back over to Michael to close us out today. Thank you so much for allowing me to facilitate this conversation.
Thank you, Brooke. It's been great.
Thank you, Brooke, for moderating. That was awesome. We're really pleased to have you in the student family, in addition to all the great work you're doing with Darcy and the folks at Sweatland. And Candice, thank you for at least virtually coming back to campus. You're such a great asset in the Case community. The article that Bob Smith did on you in the Case Alumni Association, I know, got a lot of attention, and your journey from pathology to cheese and being an entrepreneur in Cleveland Heights, and as a Cleveland Heights resident, like my cousins Doug and Karen, we're so happy to see cool small businesses in the region doing neat things. So can't wait to continue to follow the Marchant story and eat more of your cheeses when I get back from the Azores. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Thanks. And bring me some cheese back from the Azores. I expect it.
The pressure's on. I'll have to go figure out what to bring that won't stink up my luggage. Stay tuned for more. We'll have more summer programming. Check on our website and on Startup Tree. We're putting together a great program of other alums. So stay tuned and have a wonderful rest of your day. Good to see everybody.
Thank you, everyone.